Hey, Stellan Cousins. You already know what time it is. In a minute, horror stories. In a minute, horror stories. Mm. So I went back. Back. Why? Because, oh my god. That's not why. Why? Because I feel like the videos from from a little bit ago might be a little more crazier than the ones, that are recent. So it's just 7 months ago, just at the beginning of the end of last year. But let's get into it. Three true neighbor horror stories. I like the neighbor ones because what are y'all neighbors doing? You gotta be careful because if you have a terrible neighbor, it can make your living situation hell. Hell. So let's get on into it. Go on. Grab a blunt, please. Grab a bottle of water to wash down that blunt. Grab a bag of chips to help with the munchies after you smoke the blunt and drink the water. And grab a blanket so you can be snuggled while you're smoking a blunt when you put it out and decide to eat your chips and drink your water. Okay? Let's get into it, guys. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all for supporting me. I'm gonna give y'all props every time I can because I really appreciate y'all every single day. I do this for myself. I did this for myself, to be honest, because I enjoy doing this. I enjoy watching horror stuff. I am a big, big, big horror fan. One day, y'all will be watching my horror movies because I take horror very seriously. People will be dead, let me tell you, in my movies. You thought he was surviving? He's not. You thought she was surviving? She's not. You think he's dead? He is. But that's in the future. Why? Because I love a good horror movie, and I feel like these lately are not as scary. Like, you don't have to be too realistic to be scary, but at least make it believable. You know what I mean? So, when y'all see my name on TV, just know that y'all help me. And just know that I will come back and always chat with y'all. What? Even when I'm big, y'all are still gonna be getting some horror videos. Like, what are you talking? So let's get into it because I can chat with y'all forever. Because I really appreciate you guys. I do it for myself, but I do it for myself, and I enjoy doing it with you guys. So, three true neighbor horror stories from our homies SSG Animations. Please, please, please. And as I always say, you guys can always go watch these videos with them. So if you have not already, please subscribe to their channel. You know what I mean? Because, like I said, this was 7 months ago. They just posted something today and yesterday. You ain't gonna see that for who knows how long. You know what I mean? So, yeah, let's get into it. Hunting season.
It happened when I was 17 years old. I didn't have a great family, and
What?
almost everything else in life was crappy. My parents fought all the time, and I witnessed screaming matches almost every night. Most times when I had the courage, I would try to butt into their arguments and de-escalate things, but my parents would always reply with, "Go to your room, Matt."
So shut up
It didn't
arguing
take
in the
long
damn
before
living
they
room.
eventually got a divorce, and I was sent to live with my aunt, so I won't see things get ugly.
That's crazy.
Now, my aunt was a good
This is
woman,
the
and
second
I loved
time.
living.
Like, this is the second time I did another video. I'll tag it. Or no, I won't. I don't think so. Hee hee hee. Y'all gonna find it. I would tag it, but I think I'm this. I don't know. I don't know the order of the way they're gonna be posted. But I just seen another video, and the family went through a divorce, and they sent the little boy to his grandma's house. Like, y'all saying so things won't get ugly. I promise you, it's going to be worse. So that baby is somewhere else. Like, the little boy ended up going and getting bullied at a whole nother school. almost witnessed a boy get snatched up into a house. Like, seen the weird ass man licking his face. Like, the little boy sees a lot. Oh, cause y'all wanna hide them from the ugly. It's gonna be ugly. I'm sure y'all been talking shit about each other way before. So just let that wee lad stay in their house. You over here sending him to someone else's house. Why would you want to go to his auntie's house?
See things get ugly. Now, my aunt was a good woman, and I loved living with her, but there was something I enjoyed even more, and that was staying with her old neighbor, Lady Cassie. I know stereotypically old people are seen as boring individuals who stay inside knitting all day, but Lady Cassie was very different.
Weird.
She was an agile, interesting woman who was into a lot of things, and since I didn't have anyone my age living around the neighborhood that I could talk to, I always found myself having conversations with Lady Cassie, and talking to her was great. Her house was decorated with skin pelts, as she told me her husband was a dedicated hunter who had hunted every animal known to man. Now, even at a young age, I knew this statement was far-fetched, but I let it slide as her husband was dead and I didn't want to speak ill of the dead. During one of my occasional visits to her place, after we had talked for a while, I asked Lady Cassie if I could go to the bathroom. On my way back to the living room, I noticed a room with its door slightly ajar, and I walked in to see something odd.
Why would you just
It was filled with what seemed to be skin pelts, and while some were on display decorating the walls of the room, others were used to design book covers and other things. I then heard the words,
"They're beautiful, aren't they?"
And I turned to see Lady Cassie walking into the room. She then continued with,
"My husband brought them home from a hunting trip, and he never told me what animal he got the pelt from."
As she spoke, I realized that I, too, couldn't guess what animal it was from, as the look and the texture of the pelt felt different.
Folk?
After looking around for a while, we left the room and we began to talk about other things, as Lady Cassie always had some great stories to tell.
So anything could be
After a
going on
long
with the
afternoon and
neighbors?
numerous interesting conversations,
You did just see me
I finally decided
get
to
your
leave.
part out. Mind your business.
Lady Cassie walked me out of the house, and as we were on her front porch, I noticed a shady, lanky man walking down the street. It was one of our neighbors, who everyone called Shady Jeremy, as the man never spoke.
Why you gotta be
He also
shady?
had a really
Gotta
scary
hit-
aura around him that made people generally avoid him. Lady Cassie noticed me looking at the man, so she said,
"Stay away from that man, Matt. Some neighbors are meant to be avoided."
I then quickly replied with,
Like you.
"You don't need to tell me twice."
You and your damn
After
dead-ass
that, I said my
killer-ass
goodbyes, and
husband.
I quickly headed home. It was a bit strange, but when I arrived at my doorstep, I could feel someone staring at me. My eyes started to dart around, and it didn't take long before I noticed Shady Jeremy standing on his front porch and staring at me intensely.
He looking at you
It
for
seemed
nothing.
like his eyes were
What's
trying to
wrong with
tell me something, but
you? Oh, they're kind
I
of
wasn't
red.
waiting to find out. Scared now, I rushed into my aunt's house and locked the door.
What?
It was really difficult to
Why?
sleep that night, as all I
Why?
could see
Watch Jeremy know something about that woman and her husband. He's gonna have someone that was close to him and went somewhere with that lady husband and came back a carpet. You know what I mean? Like, or something, or some of the neighborhood. You know why there ain't no kids in the neighborhood? Because the lady that you, Miss Cassie, her husband, be snatching them up, making them into coats. You know what I mean? Like, I know y'all understand what I'm saying. Like, I have my one cousin who I know she's gonna watch this video, and I know she's saying it with me that there's something wrong with Miss Cassie. Miss Cassie ain't no good.
my aunt's house and locked the door. It was really difficult to sleep that night, as all I could see was Shady Jeremy staring at me every time I closed my eyes.
To leave Jeremy alone.
The
Why?
next day,
He ain't doing
my
anything
aunt told me that I would be
about
going
it.
back to the city during the following week to stay with my mom, as things had finally settled down between her and my dad. She then told me to get my things in order, as
They got
I'd
a
be leaving
divorce?
soon.
Or are they back together?
That afternoon, I went to Lady Cassie's house to tell her the news. She wasn't in her living room, but I could tell she was still at home as her front door was open, so I
Word.
let myself in. When I had finally settled down, I noticed a diary that was decorated with a special pelt I had seen in that room. It was sitting on the table next to me, so I picked it up and started to
Why
admire
don't
it.
you just...
Curious, I opened the book to read what was inside, but that's when I heard Lady Cassie say,
"Each pelt is more beautiful than the last. I really need to collect more."
Confused, I wondered what she meant by that, as I knew she couldn't get any new pelts without her husband. But I quickly ignored it, as I told myself that it was probably just an old lady mumbling to herself.
Oh,
Besides, I was there for another reason, as I came to tell her I was leaving soon. The look on her face was a mixture of sadness and disappointment, as Lady Cassie said.
That's very sad to hear, Matt. You're the only person here who's nice enough to visit and talk to me. I hope this isn't too much to ask, but I'd love it if you could come over tonight so that we can have one of our amazing conversations just one last time.
Why does it have to be at nighttime?
I immediately agreed, as I wanted to see her one last time before I left. On my way home, I didn't realize it yet, but the news of my leaving made me forget about the Shady Jeremy incident that had happened the day before. I had started walking with caution ever since it happened, but at that moment the only thing that was on my mind was my abrupt departure. After dinner that evening, I made my way down the street to Lady Cassie's house, and as I was nearing the front porch, I felt a strong hand grab me by the wrist and pull me away.
Jeremy?
Alarmed, I looked back to see Shady Jeremy violently pulling me away. I started to scream, but he quickly held his hand over my mouth. In an effort to free myself, I bit down on his palm. The pain made him release me for a second, so I immediately ran towards Lady Cassie's house. I quickly entered the house, and I slammed the door, breathing hard. I then started to scream.
He tried to...
Lady Cassie, please call the cops. Shady Jeremy just attacked me.
And you about to
Nothing but silence responded to my pleas, and that's when I finally realized that something was wrong, as Lady Cassie's house was now completely dark, and it was lit with strange candles.
Open that damn door and get out.
Before I could do or say anything, I heard Lady Cassie's voice say,
You have been given the privilege to be the ultimate beast.
What are you talking
And
about?
for that, I promise, I will only hunt you for 30 minutes. Bear in mind, child, that you have the right to run and defend your privilege. If you win, I will spare you. But if you lose, I'll take what makes you beautiful.
Confused and afraid, I racked my brain, hoping to find a feasible explanation for what was going
you
on.
had 30 minutes to get a weapon.
I didn't understand a single word Lady Cassie had just said, and I was still shaken up from being attacked by Shady Jeremy.
Because in 30 minutes she gonna start
It took
beating
me a
the shit
while
out of
before
you.
I managed to stutter the words. What the hell is going on, Lady Cassie?
Oh, was I wrong?
But before I could get an answer, I felt a sharp pain sear through my arm.
She shot you!
I fell to the floor, writhing and screaming in pain. I looked down to see the cause of the pain, and that's when I saw an arrow sticking out of my arm.
Oh, an arrow.
Before I could do anything about it, I saw Lady Cassie lunge at me wearing an African-themed mask, and she was holding a machete in her right hand. I managed to dodge the attack before running away. I then frantically looked for an exit out of the house. I quickly headed for the back door, and I ran out through there. In front of me was nothing but the forest, and with no other options, I decided to run into it.
Why would you run into
As I
the
ran through the
forest?
forest, I heard Lady Cassie scream out what seemed to be a war cry. I felt my heart beating fast, and as I looked behind me, I saw a 60-year-old woman bolting after me like she was in her 20s.
Oh.
It didn't take long before she caught up to me, and with no hesitation, she brought her machete's blade down on my shoulder.
Oh!
Immeasurable pain filled me as I fell to the floor.
You better get something.
Lady Cassie loomed over me now, and I could hear her breathing hard through her mask. A lot of emotions ran through my head as I watched her lift the bloody machete to land the finishing blow. I felt fear, pain, and anger.
Don't worry,
but the major thing I was feeling was confusion, as even in those horrific moments, I had no idea why I was consecutively attacked by both of my neighbors. I made my peace with God as I watched Lady Cassie bring down her machete. But before the blade could connect with my neck, I heard a gunshot, and I watched Lady Cassie slowly drop to her feet.
Good shit, Jared.
Numerous people rushed towards me as I breathed a sigh of relief.
Well,
I had lost a lot of blood now, but I managed to see what was going on. And standing over me were my aunt, the cops, and Shady Jeremy.
Yep, 12 shot her.
I was taken to the hospital after the morbid incident, and my wounds were treated. When I felt a little bit better, I asked my aunt how she found me, and she told me that our neighbor, Jeremy, had come to the house and how he was aggressively gesturing towards Lady Cassie's house. She then explained how she finally knew something was wrong, as Jeremy proceeded to write the words, "Your nephew is in trouble," on a piece of paper, and that's when she called the cops. It was then I realized that our neighbor Jeremy couldn't speak, as he was dumb. A lot of things made sense to me after I was told that, like
Obviously,
what
he's
happened
not
in front of Lady
dumb.
Cassie's
He knew some
house.
shit was about to happen with
I
you,
really
but
didn't
he's
know
just
he couldn't
you.
speak, as I always thought he just didn't want to. After a couple of weeks, I was taken back home. The incident with Lady Cassie had been on the news, and my aunt told me that I had just survived a huge ritualistic serial killer. The cops had revealed to her that Lady Cassie had murdered and flayed several human beings, as numerous pelts of human skin were found at her house. That's when I had a horrific realization,
So
as I finally knew that the skin pelts I couldn't identify were human. I was also told that she carried out the same ritualistic 30-minute hunt with all of her victims, and how she skinned, preserved, and made human pelts of all the people who lost. Things began to die down after a couple of months, and I remember going back to my aunt's house and speaking with Mr. Jeremy. I apologized for misjudging him, and I thanked him for saving my life. I then asked him how he knew what Lady Cassie was going to do, and Mr. Jeremy then revealed that he too was a victim who had survived Lady Cassie's attack. He wrote all the details on a piece of paper and explained how he had survived the 30-minute hunt.
Good shit.
It also said how she had let him keep his skin, but to keep him from talking, she morbidly cut his tongue out, and she threatened to kill his family if he said anything. He was too scared to talk after his own horrific experience, so he decided to avoid everything and everyone. But he couldn't stand by when he saw me going there that night, as he knew something was up and he didn't want me to die, so he did something about it. I ended up staying in touch with Jeremy even after I went back home. And while I had some serious trauma due to the ordeal, talking to him helped me get through it. It's been a very long time now since it happened, but this morbid experience has left me with a bad attitude towards neighbors. Nowadays, every time I see someone who's supposed to be my neighbor, I try my best to avoid them, as you can never know if one of the most prolific serial killers is the same person who tells you good morning every time you walk through your front door.
You're having good chats with this woman. Wearing African skin. Where'd you get it from? White woman?
Hi, my name is John. I've always wanted to live alone. The idea of independence has haunted me since I was 15, and when I finally turned 18, I made up my mind to move out of my parents' house and get an apartment of my own. I didn't care about education. I just wanted to make money and get out of the countryside. I didn't have enough money to get anything fancy, but I was determined to get my own space. I finally found an apartment after years of searching and working. Getting an apartment in the city is not an easy task, but I found one. A very nice apartment. My very first home. And it was all mine. And I was happy.
Good.
Until I experienced the horror of my life.
Terrible neighbor?
It was a bright sunny day, and I had just arrived at the building where I was going to move into. Most of my belongings were already moved into the new apartment. Only 2 bags were left, the ones that I brought with me. I paid the taxi driver, and as he drove off, I dragged my bags along with me. I got to the elevator, and I got into it, pressed the level 3 button. I kept on moving whimsically in the elevator. I was so elated as the elevator stopped at floor 3. It opened, and the face that welcomed me at the other end quickly sucked up the air of happiness and turned the mood gloomy. It was a man. He looked like he was in his 40s. His face was very wrinkly. He had a wart on his cheek. His eyes were designed with dark circles. He looked unhealthy. To top it all off, he was dressed in all black like a serial killer. Everything seemed off about him. I walked out of the elevator and he walked in. I couldn't help but turn around to look at him again.
Why would you do that?
He smiled at me as the elevator doors closed. His crooked and dirty teeth disgusted me. The elevator doors closed, and I heaved a sigh and thought to myself, that was weird. It took me a few seconds to brush off the feeling of creepiness that oozed from the man I had just encountered, but as I took a few steps further and saw my new apartment, I was happy again. I kissed the door before I went in. After a couple hours of setting up, I settled down. I felt hungry and decided to cook. I was craving noodles. I picked up my wallet and decided to head to the store, I had seen one nearby when I was in the taxi. I had to get food items, so I went to the store and got what I needed. As I made my way back to the apartment, I bumped into the same man that I'd seen earlier. This time around, he was wearing a face cap, and the face cap fell off as I bumped into him. His balding head just added to the horrible-looking image that I had painted in my head, giving me a very cold stare, and his glare sent shivers down my spine. His body gave off some kind of smell, like a rotten animal. I quickly moved back away from him, both in disgust and fear. He moved towards me, and I moved further away. He bent over and picked up his cap and put it on. I'm so sorry. I quickly apologized. He didn't reply and just nodded his head. I headed back towards the elevator, and he was trailing behind me. We both got into the elevator, and the elevator ride was in awkward silence. I just wanted this elevator to go faster to my floor. As we got to level 3, we both got off from the elevator, and I headed towards my apartment, which was apartment 5A. I noticed that he was moving towards the next apartment, which was apartment 5B, the one next to me. He was my neighbor. I watched as he got into his apartment, and the moment he shut the door, I rushed into my apartment and locked the door, partly because I was scared, and also because I was hungry and needed to eat. I cooked and settled down. I had my food and I was full. I let out a sigh of relief, and I moved to my bedroom to sleep. As I laid my head on the pillow, I heard a scream. It was blood-curdling and scary. I quickly got up from my bed and rushed to the door. I was about to open it, and I hesitated for a second. What if it's something really bad? I thought to myself, so I slowly opened the door and peeped to check out what was happening. And to my surprise, the entire hallway was empty. I could not decipher where the sound came from. The only place that came to mind was my neighbor's apartment. I wonder what's going on in there, I said in a very soft and almost quiet tone. I moved back slowly and closed the door. I couldn't sleep soundly after that. I slept very late and woke up very early because I kept having disturbing dreams. 2 weeks had passed and the same things kept happening. More disturbing sounds emerged from his apartment, and I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't sleep at home and would often doze off at work. I wanted to call the police so bad, but I didn't want to cause any trouble. 2 days later, I got home feeling super stressed and needed to rest. Suddenly, but not surprisingly, another scream came from my neighbor's apartment. This time it sounded even louder than before. I also heard his door open, and after a few seconds, I heard it shut. Enough is enough, I said out loud as I made my way to his apartment to confront him. I got to his door and banged it angrily. I kept on banging the door, but no one replied. I calmed down and used the doorbell. Still, no reply. It was only after a few minutes that my nose picked up a horrible smell. It was the same smell that I got off of him when I bumped into him the other day. It was disgusting. I was so pissed because he wouldn't answer the door and tried to open the door, and to my surprise, the door was unlocked. I hesitated for a second, but I went in anyways. The horrible smell hit me even harder as I stepped into his apartment. His apartment was very disorganized and dirty. Sharp objects were lying around. The lights in his room were very dim. You'd have to keep your eyes wide open to see anything properly. Hello? Is anyone at home? I said as I moved around and held my palm against my nose to prevent further inhalation of the bad smell. His apartment gave off a haunted vibe. I kept calling out for anyone to reply, but no one answered. I heard slight noises coming from his bathroom. His apartment was structured similarly to mine. I thought he was hiding in the bathroom and marched angrily towards it. I banged the bathroom door and there was still no reply. I listened carefully, and the sounds that came from the room were not human-like. So I decided to open the bathroom door, and the horrors that came with that decision.
That's the craziest thing I have ever heard, y'all. Ever in life. He said the sounds that were coming from behind the door were unhuman-like. So I decided to open the door. Like, what are you really saying right now? It sounded crazy as hell in there, so you decided to go kill yourself? Like, that's what I heard.
Have haunted me ever since.
Because you heard
There were
up in there.
body parts, human body parts.
Mm.
Several horrors that came with that decision have haunted me ever since.
Because you did that.
There were body parts, human body parts. Several heads, legs, hands, and eyes all over the bathroom. Rats and cockroaches plagued the bathroom. The stench that came from it was so toxic. I let out a very unmanly scream. I just experienced the worst thing ever. It felt like I was trapped in a horror movie. I fell to the floor and hurriedly crawled away from the bathroom. Suddenly, the light went off, and I could barely see a thing.
About to
Only
die.
a shadowy figure approaching me. As I tried to get up and run for my life, a very sharp object that seemed like a knife went swiftly through my hand. It was so sharp I let out another scream, a scream of pain.
Just your hand.
I pulled it out and the pain felt more intense. I tried to get up as the shadowy figure kept approaching me slowly. I noticed another switch. I quickly used my other hand to switch it on. It only turned on one light bulb. It didn't make a big difference, but at least I could see. As I turned my head to look at the person that was approaching me, a scary figure struck fear into me. It was my neighbor. He was holding a hammer. He looked even scarier than usual. I could feel my spine tingle as blood dripped down from my hand. He was definitely ready to kill me. I could tell from his face. All that was going through my mind was how to get out of this apartment alive. Instantaneously, he grabbed the rotary drill that was beside him and threw it at me. My reflexes kicked in and I dodged it. He plunged towards me and I began to run. I tried to head for the door, but he grabbed me by the collar of my shirt and pulled me down. He tried to bash my head with the hammer, but I rolled away. He kicked me and I fell towards the door. He tried to hit me again with the hammer, and I dodged it. The hammer went through the very thick door. I reached for the doorknob and tried to open the door, but it just wouldn't open. He raised his hammer a third time and tried to hit me. This time, he managed to hit my face. Two of my teeth flew out of my mouth, and I lashed out cries of pain. No, please! I begged for my life, but he didn't care.
At all.
As he raised his hammer for the fourth time, I kicked him hard and he fell to the floor. I stood up, quickly opened the door and ran out. I made my way through the hallway and headed for the stairs. I kept jumping over the stairs to get down quickly. I looked up and saw that he was behind me, charging through the stairs relentlessly. I ran down the stairs even faster, and as soon as I got out of the building, I stopped, got a taxi, got into it, and went to the police station.
That's fair.
I rushed out of the taxi without paying the driver. I went into the station and collapsed immediately. The next day, I woke up in the hospital. I had passed out due to the loss of blood. I explained what had happened to the police, and they started their investigations. By the time they got to his apartment, he was already gone.
Of course.
A few days later, he was caught hiding in an abandoned building where even more bodies were found.
Oh.
He was arrested and sent to prison after he was found guilty of many horrible crimes.
He's just killing everybody.
Turns out the screams I heard every night were that of his victims. He tortured them and cut off their body parts, and to worsen it, he ate them.
Oh.
He was a cannibal. My neighbor was a cannibal. After the incident, I went back to my parents, and ever since, I've not recovered from the trauma. I still have terrible nightmares.
In reality, if you seen the Jeffrey Dahmer documentary on Netflix, his neighbor, if she would have went up in there, who knows what would happen to sis? He already tried to get her to go in there multiple times, and he tried to give her some food. Boy, you're trying to feed her people? Fuck out of here, you disrespectful bastard. He didn't get what he deserved. I'm just saying, he got what happens to people that go into other people's houses. You know, you're not 12. Who do you think you are going into someone's house, going through it, and then going to the bathroom in your mind, you're like, oh, he's hiding in the bathroom. Boom, 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 boom. And then when it starts going dark and he starts trying to kill you, then it's an issue. Now, in reality, if he had no bodies in his house and all of the bodies in the abandoned house, you would still be in trouble. Why? Because you just went up in somebody's house. That's trespassing. And you just broke in because you opened his door. You were banging at the door and nobody answered the door for you. That's breaking and entering. Now you going to jail for breaking and entering and you just lost 2 teeth. All because he got all his bodies in the side home. You just call them men's and let them do their damn job. That's what they there for. Don't you go play Nick Drew. You know, like Nancy.
Before I tell you my story, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jonah, and I'm currently 19.
I want these to
The story I'm
work.
about to tell you happened to me when I was 11 years old.
I hate when the subtitles.
As the only child of a wealthy family, I used to be very noisy and spoiled. My father would go on business trips every month and stay in other countries for days. He was a hard-working man, but his ambitions caused me to spend my childhood fatherless. However, my mother was always there for me, and being rich helped us a lot. Although I lived a life that a child could only dream of, everything changed when I was 11. We began to receive news and letters from different banks that would describe how much debt we were in. It didn't take long to realize that my father's company was bankrupt. Everything happened so fast. In a couple of months, our family became poor.
Damn.
My father, instead of being around us, decided to divorce my mother and flee the country as soon as possible. Thus, we were left behind with no money. But the terrorizing event that I'll tell you about now happened after all this chaos we faced. My mother started to work so that she could provide food and shelter for me. We moved to a tiny and dirty flat with 1 room in it. The neighborhood was not trustworthy, to say the very least. I could always hear people crying, shouting, and beating each other in the streets. Every night, I would wake up with loud sounds of guns being fired off. I hated living there. There was nothing we could do. This place was the best we could afford at the time. One day, my mother returned from work. She opened the door and came inside the flat. I could see that she had brought a friend with her. Her friend was an older man with white hair and a long beard.
Who the hell
Something
is
was
this,
unsettling about this
girl?
guy's eyes.
Who
He
is
had dark
this?
brown eyes with wrinkles around them. What made me creeped out by his eyes was how he was looking at me. At his first glance
You don't
upon
need no
me,
man, it ain't
his
no
eyes
time
shined with
yet.
unearthly madness and an incredible sense of joy. He opened his mouth and showed his toothless
Ew,
gingiva.
girl.
He was trying to smile, but all I could see was an endless void. Unexpectedly, he was a very muscular older man. I could see some scars on his arms that looked like knife wounds. My mother introduced the man to me and started to tell me how they met.
Why?
This older man was our neighbor. He was living downstairs with his sick wife. This older man was my mother's hero, as she told me several times. Around a couple of minutes, I was introduced to this man. When my mother was on her way home from work, a couple of teenage thugs from the neighborhood had tried to mug her. She told me that the older man had come running to rescue her. He saved my mother, which is why she invited him to our flat. After hearing this story, my prejudices toward the older man replaced themselves with a sense of gratefulness and admiration. We started to talk. At first, he seemed a bit weird, but after a while, we began to enjoy the conversation.
I'm
There
just
was
like,
laughter
you
and
don't
joy.
have- You know?
He sat with us for 3 hours, and as he was about to leave, he hugged me. His grip was way too strong, and his breath smelled like garbage. As he was hugging me, he said, "Oh, you're such a good child that I just want to take you to my house
How do you
and
know?
caress your hair for hours." His strange sentence creeped me out, but my mother took it as an act of affection. He wished us a good night and glanced at me one more time before he left. After he left, I went to bed and started to sleep around 3 a.m. I woke up because of a troubling and familiar smell. At first, I didn't understand why the smell was so familiar, but when I opened my eyes, I realized that the smell was the
Ew.
older man's breath. I saw his face right on mine. He was leaning over me with an open
Trying
mouth.
to kiss me?
The room was dim because of the moonlight shining through the window, and that dimness allowed me to see the red veins in this man's terrifying eyes. He grinned as he looked at my frightened face, and a drop of saliva fell from his mouth onto my cheek. He whispered very quietly,
Oh, I want to die.
"Don't worry, Tim. Your daddy will always protect you." It freaked me out. I remember everything going dark after seeing that horrible scene.
Sir?
I fainted, and when I regained consciousness, it was already the afternoon. I searched the house to find out if the older man was hiding somewhere, but I couldn't see him or my mother at the flat. That time was around 2 p.m., so I figured my mother was just at work. It was probably just a nightmare, I thought, and I continued hanging out inside the flat as if nothing happened. When the night fell upon our wretched neighborhood, I heard a fright that had started on the street. I peeked from the window, and I saw my mother lying on the ground while the older man was frightening 2 young people. I rushed outside, screaming and crying, "Mother, you all right? Mother!" The old man fought off the youngsters and told them to help me carry my mother inside our flat. Still shaken by the nightmare I saw, I hesitated to trust him, but I realized it was the most logical thing I could do in that situation. We carried my mother inside, and the man told me that she was not badly injured. I thanked him as he tried to wake my mother. After several attempts, he gave up. Realizing that she would not wake up, I started to get worried. My worries grew bigger as I saw the man smiling and looking at me as if I was a prize he wanted to have. "Tim, your daddy missed you. Your mama is ill. Do you want to see her and hug her?" He said as he approached me.
No, because you're going to
"My
try
name's
to
not
take
Tim.
me."
Stop calling me that," I shouted as I grabbed the chair next to me. My arms shook because the chair was heavier than I thought. He laughed and said, "You would not hurt your daddy, would you? Put the chair down, Timmy, and let me take you to our house. Your mother missed you." As he came closer, I hit him as hard as I could. His voice changed, and I could sense his anger. "Timothy, you will listen to your father. You are coming with me," he yelled as he pulled the chair out of my hand and grabbed me by my hair. He dragged me to his flat downstairs. As he opened the door, I started to smell the disturbing scent of the house. What I saw in that house is still the reason for my sleepless nights today. I saw a skeleton-like figure lying on the couch with rotten skin. The corpse's skin looked like it had melted and mixed with the sofa. I screamed as hard as I could. I tried to escape as the old man called me Tim and told me to stop frightening my dad. I knew that I wouldn't survive this if I didn't fight dirty. So I bit the older man's hand so hard that I actually ripped a piece of the flesh out. He let go of me as he shouted curses, and I ran upstairs. I got inside my home and locked the door. When I got inside, I saw that my mother was conscious and already calling the police. She told me that it was the older man who knocked her unconscious. While we waited for the cops to arrive, the older man tried to break into our place for 10 minutes straight and finally managed to do so. As he burst open the door, my mother and I screamed so loud. At that moment, we heard police sirens. The older man jumped on us, and I could understand that his only intention at that point was to kill us. We tried our best to defend ourselves as he punched and scratched us. He maniacally continued to hurt us until we heard gunshots. The older man got shot several times, and his motionless body fell onto me. After that incident happened, the police told us about the older man. He was a mentally unstable man who had lost his child 15 years ago. His son, Timothy, was my age when he died. The older man and his wife were going through depression after losing their only child. Upon searching the house, the police identified the corpse on the couch as the older man's wife. They told me that after his wife died, the man lost his sanity and tried to recreate his family. He was most probably planning to keep me locked up in his flat and pretend like I was his son, little Tim. To this day, I still don't know how to react to all of this. But in my dreams, I see little Tim looking at me through the mirror and smiling with purple lips.
Purple, that's dead. That means he's dead. Body's dead. Cold. What? I did enjoy these videos. What I say, y'all? I see these. What? The further back you go, the better they get. Because what is really going on? What? You trying to kidnap somebody's child? Kidnap somebody's child. That lady tried to kill that boy. What? Cut out Jeremy's tongue. What was the only two I can remember right now? Those were the craziest ones. But that being said, let me know which one was your favorite. This is a very crazy video. I say my favorite has to be Jeremy. Jeremy Nim. Cause everything was peaches and keen until what? Until the old lady started popping off. She tried to kill him. You got Jeremy and them. You got basically Jeff Dom, animated version, and then got this. So let me know which one was your favorite, guys. And until next time, bye.